Welcome to the Steve Has a Chat podcast, where I call someone out of the blue with the record button on and hope to have an unscripted conversation about Microsoft business applications. Let's see how it goes. Enjoy.
Hello, this is Ryan.
Hey Ryan, Steve Mordue, how's it going?
Oh, Steve Mordue, how you doing? Does this mean I'm in trouble?
No, you are not in trouble, but you are about to be a guest on my Steve Has a Chat podcast if you have time and are up for it.
You mean like right now?
Like right now, already recording.
Hey, okay. Let me check my calendar. There's nothing I'd rather do right now than be an impromptu guest on a Steve show.
Well, we'll try and make sure you don't regret that decision.
I regret a lot of decisions, Steve. It wouldn't be the first. Yeah.
So let me ask you first, how long have you been with Microsoft?
I just crossed 5 years.
5 years.
Just this past fall. Yeah.
So I used to be a Salesforce consultant. We were Salesforce consultants for about 10 years. And
Okay.
we moved over to Microsoft when they first moved CRM online back in 2011. So about 10 years ago.
Sure. Yeah.
And I remember there being a few bumps making that transition going from on-premise to online, but then it kind of leveled out into what I kind of called the lazy river ride. It was predictable. It didn't move very quickly. There was no urgency.
Yeah.
And then James took over, and he brought in all you young guys, and it's been like a rocket roller coaster ride ever since. And it's you ever been on one of those really big roller coaster rides where you start praying for it to end, but it's not going to. It's just going to keep looping around, and you can't get off. I almost feel like for a lot of us partners that have been around at least since it was Lazy River, that, man, my head is rocking from all of the stuff you guys have been doing.
We don't do lazy rivers very well, Steve. It's
not anymore.
Not anymore. No,
not anymore.
At least class 3 rapids around here. Yeah.
How is it like on the inside for that kind of pace and ideation and everything that's going on internally?
It's a great question. It's it certainly has not been constant here either. And again, my experience in this community is not as long as yours. I joined it about 5 years ago, and specifically joined the Power Apps team long before Power Apps was really a thing. I joined the team when Project Sienna was, for those that are familiar with that term, the sort of precursor to Power Apps, was kind of in an early beta phase. And there were grand ambitions of expanding out who can build software, but not a lot of, how do we say it kindly, not a ton of product truth yet behind that goal.
So I was in the audience, I think, for one of your very first presentations before a big group of this product. Yeah. And you looked a little deer in the headlights at the time.
I still feel that way sometimes. But if you take that over the course of the last 5 years, where that idea has solidified, that product has gotten more mature. Certainly, there's still more work to do, but we've gone from literally 0 humans using at least standalone Power Apps to millions around the world, and really also in the same breath gone from very long tail, very simple use cases to this grand merger with the Dynamics platform and customers building and trusting, frankly, much more sophisticated workloads to the platform. The world has changed a lot for us internally in how we approach this problem. As you go through that product maturity life cycle, in the early stage, it's really about, can we make anyone successful here? Now it is much more about how do we scale and how do we focus on enterprise trust and developer productivity, and really turn millions into hundreds of millions. And that's.
Oop, we got a little stall there.
Right. Oh, yep. Did I lose you for a second?
Just for a second. I kind of sometimes think of Microsoft kind of like the Japanese manufacturing economy, where they saw ideas that we would come up with and then they would put all their resources to make it better, faster, cheaper. Whereas a lot of the things we're doing in the Power Platform are not things that weren't being done before by others. It's just that that someone on the team somewhere recognized, hey, there's this movement going on out here with some of these smaller players, and I think it's got some legs. So let's drop all of the arsenal that we have available as Microsoft onto this idea. And because clearly we weren't the first low code platform, but suddenly we're bringing everything Microsoft has to bear on this idea, and to see it blow up like that, and you can say that for almost everything that we've got going on. The bots, flow, all of these sorts of things. We weren't the first, but then we came in and just put all this horsepower into an idea.
Yeah, and it's so much is about execution and executing at the right time and doing it for the right people. And I think part of the reason why we internally work quickly and don't want to be on the lazy river is also because I think we try to approach it with this fundamental this is going to sound weird, but distrust of our own instincts. To say, look, we have a thesis about we have a thesis that people are going to want to build software faster. We have a thesis that they're going to want to do that beyond just forms over data. That's going to want to take many different forms. But in the nitty gritty details of who's actually going to find the most value in individual features and individual assembly of those features, there's a lot of margin for error. And the sooner you get real software into the hands of real humans and they can use it and react to it and give you feedback, actively about it, but also just give you feedback through their usage or non-usage of it, then the sooner you have real data to adjust and change and do the next thing.
So it's not really like build it and they will come. It's more like build something and let's see who comes.
Exactly.
and then build some more.
Exactly. Develop a relationship with those people who have come and then make sure that you're building it in a way that they're going to, get really excited about it and then extend to others. And, so we really prioritize, when we have enough of a hypothesis to head in a direction, get there as soon as possible in the world and then work really closely and quickly once you've landed there to make it great and learn and be willing to be wrong. And be willing to change.
Don't worry, I point out when you walk guys off.
Absolutely right.
It's a lot of moving parts.
Right? Yeah.
And I know you came in through the Power Apps door, but have since kind of got your fingers into the whole all the pieces of the platform. It feels like, and there's a lot of moving parts going on. Yes. And whenever you have that many moving parts, there's going to be bumps and issues along the way. So I can imagine that's just a continuous thing that somebody's building something over here, somebody over here, maybe they didn't coordinate as well as they should have. And it gets discovered later. And then there's this, I imagine these little fire drills go on internally to, left hand wasn't talking to the right hand enough. Let's get that stuff going on. Is that part of your role, is to referee those sorts of things or identify them?
I guess you could say that. Yeah. I think, and that's also part of growing a product and a team across a really wide surface areas. How do you, how do we put in place the right listening mechanisms to customers, to data and reviews internally so that we can catch those things sooner and react to them more quickly? Because in many ways, the ambition here is to span a really wide area of software and do it with a platform that has value and relevance to a number of different people in that spectrum, which is fundamentally really hard. It's one thing to build a focused experience for one very focused narrow niche of people. It's another, that alone is hard. It's another to build a set of tools that a lot of different people can use. But I think that was actually part of our if you rewind several years ago and look at what we did between the Power Apps software project, which started independently, and the Dynamics platform and bringing them together, we really realized at the limit these things converge. At the limit, making it easier for non-traditional software people, citizen developers, amateurs, makers, whatever you want to call them, and making it faster for professionals to build apps. Those two ends have to meet each other at some point for this to really scale. And so let's rip that Band-Aid off.
How close do you think we are to getting to that that ideal point. I mean, I think there's still, even when I look at the citizen developer story, a citizen can go so far.
Right.
And obviously we'd like them to go as far as they're able to go.
Yeah.
To comfortably go, and pro dev takes over, and I have to assume there's a continuous motion inside to keep trying to move that line.
Yep.
Let's simplify some of these formulas that may be required that are
Yep.
just wherever those stopping blocks where you see a citizen is able to get this far and hits a wall.
Yep.
Can we get them to the next wall? How much of going on in that process?
No, it's a great question, and it is really one of the central things that keeps driving a lot of what we do. I mean, we also look at a professional's experience through that journey, right? And you look at not enlightened professionals such as yourselves, but all of the other software people out in the world who are very skeptical of platforms, right? And who have an instinct to sort of start from scratch and write everything themselves. And go through stages.
Some of that could be financially motivated also.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Right. But I think realizing that, hey, two trends are really converging here. To your point earlier, low code is not new. But we've had low code in two very different camps. This is the company that shipped Excel 36 years ago now. We certainly know low code for true amateurs, and there is there's always been this world of people without a software development background working around the boundaries of the software they're given with tools to solve problems, and that goes straight
the access wizards.
Absolutely. Excel, macros, VBA, Access, InfoPath, and a number of other products outside of Microsoft. That's an enduring tradition. And then on the other side, what we've been doing as professional software people for the last 40 years is just adding layers of abstraction and tooling and not repeating ourselves and borrowing from other people to more efficiently assemble solutions as well. And you can look at a platform like what XRM was unofficially, and what Dataverse and Power Apps on top of it now is just a natural extension of making professionals more efficient by not doing everything from scratch. Now that's where those two trends converge, and you're absolutely right. To answer your question, we focus on, okay, we made a number of people successful at that. There's a plenty of existence proof in our community and in our growth numbers and in our customer stories of people coming at the product from both of those directions and getting really successful and having a lot to show for it. Now, of course, behind the scenes, we're still, I would say, very hungry. We're still at a couple orders of magnitude less than the addressable market of software consuming humans of what we could be serving, right? Even for all the astronomical growth we've seen in the platform over the last couple of years. And so it is absolutely about, how do we take people coming in the front door? I'm a Teams user. I have some Excel skills. I happen to stumble on this Power Apps thing. How far do I get on my first try? What brings me back? How do I go from a user who expresses intent to a user who has a moment of success to a user who then has an app that's used in production? And even from that point to somebody who keeps coming back to keep putting apps in production. And then similarly, as a professional, how do I expand my tool set from Azure and Visual Studio, and how do I have good experiences in my first try with a platform? How do I get to a point where I put something out there that humans are using in the world and I feel good about it? We really closely look at retention. We look at funnels through those early experiences. We look at satisfaction. All those annoying prompts of, how likely are you to recommend Power Apps to a friend or colleague? Those are really valuable data points for us, in addition to just the general growth rates overall, because they're leading indicators of the likelihood to be successful and grow in the future.
I know we definitely have had success with enterprise organizations in particular, where IT has kind of embraced this and shepherded the process and built in their own systems, like at the whole Chevron way that they go about, making Power Apps developers out of their employees, and they've got a very specific process. And I guess the other side of the equation is a smaller company that doesn't have those kind of resources, and it's just Bob, who's always been handy with spreadsheets, suddenly is trying to figure his way around. It seems like that's the one where we can't give that guy too much help. In enterprise, they're going to have their system. They maybe even have classes internally they send their people to and stuff like that. It's so smaller organizations where he's kind of left to the documents he can find and what he can understand. And, I think one of the things that Microsoft has always been a little bit of a challenge with Microsoft in documentation in particular is that they assume a certain level of understanding, in particular of Microsoft.
Yeah.
And, it's lots of folks that are coming to the platform that have zero understanding of Microsoft or history or know anything, even acronyms or none of it.
Right.
It's almost like you can't make the documentation too dumbed down,
right.
To get to that success.
Yeah.
Well, how big is the team up to now? The last number I heard, and this has been a while ago, was like 7,000. It was a pretty good sized team for Bag. How big is it now?
That's a good question. I'm not trying to dodge you. I suppose I could look it up. I don't know for sure what James's, that whole business applications group org size is, but that's actually probably a decent estimate now. That's not too inaccurate. Now that's spread across a really wide surface area. All of the first-party Dynamics apps have dedicated teams working on them. There are a number of other orgs within that organization focused on things like advancing AI and whatnot. And then there's the core platform team. That's the Charles Lamanna team, of which I'm a part of. Which we structure into. A core team focused on the back end on Dataverse, a core team focused on each of the front end products. So Power Apps, that's my team, Power Automate, Power Virtual Agents. And then we also have a dedicated group in the platform org around admin and pro developers and those experiences.
Yeah, I think when he came in, there was closer to 1,000 on the team. So, the team has exponentially grown as because you can't keep a lazy river going.
Nope.
You got to have speed when you got that many people on the payroll all working on something.
Yep. So
I also recall a time, and I know it's still there, where there was a maniacal focus by the business applications group on the competitors, particularly Salesforce at the time. And I know Salesforce is still in the radar. It does feel like we've kind of moved from really being focused on one primary competitor as we've launched all of these different applications into other competitive spaces where now you guys have hundreds of competitors that are all out there. How much do you guys focus on what the competition is doing internally and how you guys gauge what directions to go?
It's really important to be aware of what people are doing in the Microsoft in the marketplace, and we do spend a lot of time making sure that we have an intimate and hands-on, not just academic understanding of what a lot of different software companies are producing out there.
So you guys have licenses for everything.
Well, where we can, and it gets complicated, right? Because Microsoft is also partners with many companies. Some companies we have agreements with about who will or won't use what software, and we've got a lot of great lawyers to help us navigate that whole rigmarole. But I think the point is, look, we're adding software to a world that already has a lot of software in it. It's important to look left and right and be aware of what else is out there, because none of this stuff gets consumed in a vacuum by customers. You go to any moderately large customer organization, there's already a CRM system or 7 in place. There's already an ERP system or 8 in place, and there's already a bunch of individual systems around that for point things, and that's just the world we live in. And so being aware,
if they're exploring something, they're seldom exploring one thing.
Exactly, right. And often if they're exploring especially a platform, there's a lot of existing things, and a lot of the conversations become about, how does this work in an existing ecosystem, and how does it work? How can it potentially consolidate some of those things? But we've got customers. We had Ecolab at a recent digital event, kind of talking about some of their Power Apps and Dynamics implementations. The average field employee at Ecolab had something like 27 different individual tools that they had to use to get their job done. And it was a mix of, they had Dynamics, and they had Salesforce, and they had an ERP system, and they had a whole bunch of individual custom homegrown things. And this experience was just really terrible for somebody out there on a tablet or a phone trying to inspect your water filter at your company. starting to bring in Power Apps as a front door to some of those other systems without replacing them, and just even making the wayfinding better is key. So look, it's important for us to be aware of what the world is doing. I would say it's never as simple as pure competitor or not in that picture, because look, for a company like Microsoft, a lot of the names you rattled off or alluded to are also Azure customers, and we're partners with them in other places, and a lot of customers use it. And look, we're fundamentally a platform company, I think, is what it comes down to. The world is better when people can choose what they want to choose and are able to interoperate those things at scale. Now, obviously, there's incentive for us to have them using our stuff in that mix, which is why we care a lot about it. But there's really not, especially if you look at the body of what we offer, even just in the platform, there isn't a clean head-to-head competitor right now for all of it. There are certainly competitors for each piece. And I think being aware that those customers have choices and that we want them to genuinely make choose the best, and we want to be the best, that means we have to be aware of what best is, and what customers define as best is just as important as what the guy down the street is offering.
I think that the business applications group has the advantage of the enormous coattails of Office 365, now Microsoft 365.
Sure.
I don't know how many calls I get from a brand new customer who the primary reason they're looking at this platform is because they are already using Microsoft 365. And this idea that we want everything to work together and talk together. And I think those coattails are an example of coattails that, some of the other companies just don't have. You look at Salesforce, for example, they don't have this productivity suite with millions and millions of users. So their story is going to be a we can integrate story. And I just see more and more. And I think we have to give Satya credit for this because, for many years, Microsoft had kind of a mixed reputation with IT. There were lots of people that hated them and all sorts of different things. And Satya kind of seemed to have changed the attitude of the company to where IT, who used to be like, we're using on-premise Exchange. It's the only Microsoft thing we're going to touch. Right. Now they've brought in Microsoft 365. And now from an IT standpoint, it's, I don't want to make my life any more difficult than it needs to be. What's the most logical choice for business applications when we're already stood up on all of this stuff? Right. And it's an enormous advantage and a huge coattail for the whole business applications group to ride in on.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's something that, this is why we focus so much on the platform working well in teams, for example. We've put a lot of effort into that this past year. Part of that is the world turned upside down and changed, and everybody started working in teams. But the other part of that is just it's really it's a huge advantage for a customer to be able to program and customize the collaboration environment, whatever that is. And there's a long history of that within Office with SharePoint and InfoPath and stuff like that. But being able to look at that in a modern world and say, hey, I can. I already have every employee working every day inside the Teams environment. If I can start to put line of business applications in that environment, it's much easier for those employees to discover, and it's much easier for them to then work around and collaborate around when those experiences require some form of collaboration. And so, there are major Microsoft customers, Fortune 500 customers with, tens or hundreds of thousands of users in their tenant that have more than half of those users using a Power App in Teams every month. And you see IT departments using it. Those are not necessarily bottom-up citizen developer apps. You see IT departments really seeing that as a way to sort of reimagine, maybe what we might have called an intranet site, 10 years ago, but sort of reimagine an employee-facing app in the place where employees are already working.
It's sometimes I actually feel a little guilty that one of our biggest growth years was a result of a virus.
Sure.
And certainly the same could be said of Teams. Teams was doing fine, but a virus really catapulted Teams to the position that it is. Yeah. And you feel a little guilty, but then again, it is what it is, and somebody has to fill that need, and it does create some massive opportunity.
Yeah. For me, especially rewinding to March and April and May, I mean, this was really a pressure test of our whole promise. The whole shtick and spiel of saying, you can develop apps faster, you can do it quickly, you don't have to go through all the time and expense of software development, you can put it where people want to use it, got a lot less nice to have in March of 2020. It went from a lot of people from, oh, that sounds cool, I'll check that out someday, and oh, this is interesting, to this is the only game in town, and there were moments where, I hear what you're saying. It is difficult to go feel like you're thumping your chest about business success in a year where a lot of people have had a really hard time, and I really want to be sensitive to that. At the same time, the platform has really directly and indirectly helped a lot of people with those struggles. A whole number of both through the healthcare response to COVID, solutions that were implemented, almost literally overnight in some cases for, major state governments around the U.S. and national governments abroad to first roll out large-scale testing programs on portals with CDS or Dataverse behind it, and then roll out economic assistance programs on the same platform. Now rolling out return to work solutions on the same platform. Those are things where the traditional model of, start up a waterfall development process, go write a giant requirements document, triple bid it, go through it, you don't have the luxury of the Gantt chart in this world, and you have to be able to move fast. And those are places where, that is the platform we've been building for, is that environment where we got to move fast. We have to do it non-traditionally, and we have to do it with a lot less effort. This last year has really forced us to hone in on that value prop and prove that it's real, and frankly adjust a lot to make it more real for people who are trying to get that value. And so I would say we have learned a lot in the course of this pandemic. A lot of people have, but we have also been able to do some good for the world in the same breath.
It definitely was interesting timing, because if you guys probably had to pick a time for a super crunch test of our platform, maybe you'd have liked to see it another year out or something.
Yeah,
so
sure.
you can't cage these things, but it kind of hit when you guys still had some wiring to finish, and I would imagine that the pressure on the team, it's one thing we got to be out to market quickly because of competition. It's another thing because something like this has come. It has to bring a huge amount of pressure to the team to. We need to take teams to the next level. Yep. We need to take, build your own apps to the next level. Suddenly we've got an entire workforce that is now working from home that never planned to be working from home, that is completely ill-equipped for that entire motion, and these people need this stuff fast.
An entire generation of students who are now learning remotely, many of them through teams at every age group, from my first grader up to colleges and universities. It's affected everybody. But you're right. I mean, the platform has been stretched at every level, and it's not just the Power Platform. You're right. It's also very much teams. I saw really interesting internal presentation from an engineering leader in the Teams org, comparing, look, here's what our load and traffic pattern looked like in January of 2021, and then to scale superimposing that on what it looked like in March. And it's just, and not to say that, hey, look at all this great growth. It was really to say, look at what it took to go scale a planet scale service that dramatically, that quickly. And that was not a pleasant experience for the engineers having to work on that. That was, that was
late
just
nights.
as 24/7 as any other response. But for all the, no software is perfect. We like to gripe about everything, and I share my set of barbs with stuff. But man, I have a ton of respect for the Teams engineering group and how well they have handled that just massive overnight change.
So as we're recording this, vaccines for the virus are rolling out, and I assume at some point in the coming months it'll kind of be behind us.
Yep.
In the meantime, it was around long enough to push lots of people to work from home. Longer than maybe their company owners thought would have to happen, but now they've kind of gotten used to that. They've made accommodation.
Yep.
They've made it work. What do you think is going to happen when this particular crisis has passed and there's the ability to go back to normal?
Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen with all these folks? Are we going to see a mass return to offices? Are we going to see people say, this is working, or what are you guys thinking?
I mean, it's a good question. I don't know that I can speak for all of Microsoft on this one, but I think at least in our own team. I mean, look, our team is already very globally distributed. We have the majority of our engineers and core product PMs working in the Pacific time zone, but we have a significant group in Paris. We have a significant group in Bangalore. We have individual pockets. We have people in Fargo, North Dakota. We have
Israel.
A small team certainly have a team in Israel. We have teams in parts of Europe. We have a team in Toronto. So if nothing else, I think the core sort of Puget Sound based team has developed a lot more empathy for the experience of the very significant portion of our group that works around the world, and their experience joining teams. And I really hope that continues, if nothing else, even if we all end up back in offices at a more regular level. I think there's also, we've learned, you look at digital events and conferences and stuff, certainly it is not the same as being in the room with people, catching up and networking, finding those, discovery and unplanned moments with humans. And I do believe that we will go back to getting in rooms together, both as employees, but also as colleagues, and I really hope that we get to do that again soon. However, some of the digital events that we've pulled off, as unelegant as some of them have come together, also very rapidly, having to figure out how to completely reimagine conferences like Ignite virtually in just a few months. Those themselves were gargantuan, tactics. In some cases, there were orders of magnitude more participation in those events than when you had to get on a plane and fly to Orlando to get the benefit, really.
If I'm Microsoft, I don't know how eager I am to go back to in-person events, given the success of, like you say, I mean, so many more people able to attend, and Microsoft's goal in having an event isn't for us all to hang out and have beers. It's to disseminate product information to as broad an audience as possible, as in as deep a format as possible. Yeah. And sitting in a session room watching some guy present a slide deck, maybe it's a little more interactive, but not enough more interactive to justify the 30 people behind me versus 3,000 people that could be behind me in a video meeting. So, from Microsoft's standpoint, you would think that this, hey, great news. We don't have to go back to doing live events, which are, they got to be a huge expense, a huge logistical challenge, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So the only reason to go back would be that camaraderie or something,
Like all things moderation, right? And I would say I'm sure we will. I hope we will reconvene at least some live events, and I'm sure we will. I think it comes back to, though, I think we've learned that it's there's probably a bias before this past year, that a digital portion of a live event would be much less valuable. I mean, even already, I don't want to overplay that hand. Even already, we would frequently get more total usage over a lifespan of content consumed digitally when it was produced at a live event than at the live event itself. You go take a keynote at Ignite. There's 3,000, 10,000 people in the room, whatever. But then you go take the 3 months following the streaming of that online would accumulate far more visitors and users than originally. So that was already known. But being able to extend that from the keynote stage out to every session and being able to figure out how to produce that type of an event in a very decentralized way is, I think we've learned a lot through that process. Back to your question about people going to offices and the team working in places, I think there's a lot of reasons why a lot of people really value that type of working, whether there's people on my team who live alone and are really, really craving social interaction with other humans and are ready to come back. There's also people on my team and self included with young kids in the house and a lot to manage and really craving return to normalcy and in that type of life environment. So I think work from home, I think we've all learned that we can do it, and some people have learned that it's even better for them. But I think there's a lot of people who will still value working in a physical location, and I do think I hope we'll return to a good chunk of that as well.
Yeah, it does get kind of lonely for a lot of folks, especially those social people that need need to be around people, need the water cooler, need to go to lunch, as part of what they're doing. Yeah. Let me ask you about. Maybe I'll get a little self-serving here now.
No, sure.
You're familiar with our Rapid Start CRM? Yep. So we have, and I'm just curious about what the team internally thinks about motions like the one we're doing, and others, are looking at, where and I know you'll be a little biased because you're more on the Power Platform side, as is Charles, and Charles is less concerned about the first party group. They got their own problems to deal with, but we're basically making a business out of building simpler versions of what the first party teams have built for an audience that isn't prepared for that level of complexity. Yeah. And we built it to run on the $10 pass, and we recently made it free. So, I mean, I can't imagine. I'm just curious what the talk in the halls is about ISVs like us that are basically building products that are attacking directly. I mean, I'm attacking directly the sales professional for sure, and even enterprise for a lot of customers, because you've given us enough in the platform that I can build quite a bit for a lot of customers before I'd have to really go to those first party. Yeah. And what's the talk in the halls about that kind of motions?
Well, luckily we don't have any halls anymore, Steve. We're all working from home. But
that's true. That's true.
Otherwise, we would
in the video halls.
Like Steve Mordue in every elevator lobby. But no, look, I'll say a couple things on that. From I don't want to speak for Charles, but from a platform perspective, and certainly from my perspective too, yes, our day job is focused on building the platform. Our biggest customer are the first party apps running on that platform still, by revenue, by at least. And we have a lot of incentive as a Microsoft shareholder and as a member of the business applications group in seeing the first party apps be successful. In fact, a lot of our effort and our engineering effort goes into helping those first party apps be successful and stay successful and get modern and get fast and get mobile, in addition to, or in some cases around building the core platform itself.
I think James had said not that long ago that, make no mistake, those are what pay the rent.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And look, Power Apps is driving an incredible amount of growth from both a usage and a revenue perspective. But yeah, I mean, there's a established greater than a decade business in CRM at scale that customers are driving, themselves trusting billions of dollars of business to, and pay Microsoft a lot of money for that privilege, right? And so we take that very seriously, and we are directly incented to protect that business, whatever that means. Now, that said, to rewind, earlier in the conversation, we're a platform company at heart, right? And it's not just that Steve Mordue can go out there and build a CRM system on the Dataverse and Power Apps platform. I mean, we have multiple Power Apps competitors building on the Azure platform, and there are Azure, and that's that's great. As a shareholder and as a software person, like, the best solution should win, and that's never going to be a one size fits all answer for every customer. And there, to your point, there are some customers that are going to be best served by a certain piece of software, and Microsoft, as a builder of generic things, is not going to get into every niche. It's not going to get into every vertical. It's certainly, we want an ecosystem of people to build on the platform and extend things, and even build fully standalone things for those niches, because we won't get there ourselves, and we know that there are more of them out there where expertise needs to go. For Microsoft to really have a Microsoft product offering at scale, it needs to have a really big business behind it, There's plenty of opportunity in the market at other multiples that is very profitable for software vendors and very advantageous for customers that are businesses that Microsoft will not directly enter. And so I think in those worlds, if the platform doesn't work for that, then what's the point of having a platform? And so it needs to work for that, and we need to make Rapid Start successful, just like we need to make the first party Dynamics app successful. And I believe those two things are not at odds with each other, and they should live in a coexisting world. From a customer perspective, even as a platform person, a lot of people will come in and say, should I use this off-the-shelf piece of software, or should I build it myself in Power Apps? And my first answer to them is always, if the off-the-shelf thing does what you need it to do, or even does 80% of what you need it to do, it's usually worth buying it, even if the price tag feels more expensive, because what you're buying there is a team of people behind that app who not only put all the effort into making it, but are going to keep putting effort into making it better. And whether that's Steve's team or whether that's, Muhammad Alam's team, that, is almost less relevant. The concept is I'm going to buy a piece of software that people have already figured out a lot of the hard parts for this use case, and they're going to keep making it better. Now, the ability to extend it is really important in business applications, because selling shoes is very different than selling wind turbines, even if it all involves selling stuff. And so the ability to
that it's one of the reasons we ended up going free. When I first came up with that idea for Rapid Start, we launched it in 2015, and it sat on top of CRM Online, the single SKU at the time, to just really make the whole thing simpler, because there was that need for something to be simpler. And I had this dream that I was just going to sell that. People would buy it, pay me every month, and leave me the hell alone. That was what I had imagined. But everybody wants to tweak and fiddle and make it unique. And we actually looked back last year at our revenue. We had 10 times more revenue on the services of helping customers customize our app than we did on the recurring revenue. Yeah. And that's the reason we just decided, well, let's just make the app free. Sure. And lean into the services as much as I really didn't want to do that. Right. I didn't want to do that business at all. Now I'm kind of being, pulled in like the Godfather won't let me out of the services business. But you're right. Everybody needs something unique. So, we recast them as accelerators as opposed to, here's something you can just buy and use. Right. But it's the same even with the first party apps. Nobody installs a first party app and just uses it. Everybody they've all got to be molded to fit the business. And I think that's the nice thing about the platform, whether it's on first party or on, just on Power Apps, is you've got all the tools to. And that's actually one of the challenges we run into. I'm sure you guys do too, where they look at some app and they say, oh, that's not exactly what I need. And then they move on without realizing that, that can be exactly what you need. And frankly, with the tools available that we have today, not that expensive, not anything like it used to be.
And then I can make it do
yeah. But, at a fraction of what it used to cost to do those kind of services.
Part of making this stuff easier to adopt is about having apps that are much closer to what a customer needs out of the box. So they don't have to do a bunch of customization up front. Yeah. And I think something that we have been on the journey from, if you go rewind 10 years in CRM to now, is make it less of a giant monolith, make individual modules much more ready to consume. And we've done a lot of work around that. Even within Power Apps, a lot of people get started by grabbing a template and implementing it and starting to use it fairly stock, and then realizing, hey, I want to put my logo on it, and then I want to change this form, and then I want to change a field, and then I want a thing to kick off. Making the customization incremental as opposed to putting a really large tax and price tag before it's useful is one of the tactics we pursue to make it easier to get more people started. But that said, there will always be the need to tailor and customize software in a business application space. And I think one of the trends we are seeing is this blurring of lines between, we like to pretend classically that there are ISVs who produce software and put it in the world and then never touch it. And then there are system integrators who do the dirty work of services to make it work. Those lines get really blurry in the modern world where, from a classic services provider standpoint, when I'm building and customizing on a platform, it's actually much easier to then start to templatize and repeat my solution. So I'm not just doing labor every single time. And to your point, from a software maker perspective, for customers who want to constantly customize it, it gets more viable to go the other direction, depending on what your business model is. So we see a lot of people kind of living in that world. We even see customers themselves, even energy companies, healthcare companies building stuff, financial services companies building stuff for themselves on the platform, and then starting to commercialize it to other people in their industry because it's on a platform that's transferable. And that's something that, classically you didn't see with line of business software. It was built in a vacuum, custom, and very tailored for one customer, and then it sort of lived in that silo for a long time. But the ability to make those assets transferable is a huge advantage in this world.
Back when they really first started pushing the citizen developer motion,
yeah,
I think I wrote a post about, the end of SI business. This is it. We're all dead now. They won't need it. They won't need us anymore.
Yeah.
And the sky is falling, Chicken Little.
Sure.
But now, as we've seen this thing kind of roll out, because it is less expensive to get deployed, there are people building apps and using apps that would never have considered it before. So while I would say it's probably true that our average customer SI project has lost to zero in value, there's 10 times as many of them. So it's kind of evened itself out. We got many more customers available now than when the only way you could become a customer was if you had really deep pockets and a lot of patience. So we just opened up the number of potential customers, by 10 times, even though the deployment of each has gone down some. So I'm not disappointed.
And I think that trend is holding. I mean, I think you see even some of the big services companies like the Big Four and stuff like that actually seeing some very similar trends where they're building real practices on Power Platform. Whereas a couple of years ago, they didn't see it as something for their business model and maybe even a threat to their business model. Now they're realizing, look, I can drive real revenue out of this. Just the size and dollar amount and number of projects is a different mix than it was before. And in some cases, those tend towards strategic consulting engagements. It becomes, let me think about helping for a large global organization to wrap their head around, how do I use citizen development in my company? How do I keep it secure? How do I monitor it? Where do I let a business unit roll their own thing versus where do I bring in a team of professionals to build and maintain a solution? Even just that decision-making process and the center of excellence and governance practices that go around it, that's a major engagement that a lot of customers need help with right now because they haven't, they're not organized for that today or resourced for it today. And then you look at, getting into each of those individual projects, even certainly today, even in a future where apps are 10 times as easy to build as they are today, if I'm going to go roll out a mission critical solution for managing, customer data and critical decisions, I need software minded people to help me think about how to keep that compliant, about how to build it in a way that humans are going to want to use it. Just because we put a tool like Photoshop out there in the world does not instantly make everybody a photographer and a digital artist. There's still that mindset and expertise that's going to be really necessary. And so, for a lot of services organizations right now, I think they're realizing that there is a lot of value both in the execution of individual apps and projects, but then also in helping customers adapt to this new world where a lot of people can build software and you have to make decisions about who builds what and how you maintain it. And so that's an area we're putting a lot of effort.
I think definitely one of the areas that's been blown up completely is the old ROI story, because you used to be looking at a significant investment to deploy something of time and money, and the return on that investment was quite some time. And that was what was going to limit the growth of any business application platform out there was that they are, and now that's been reduced almost nothing. I mean, literally, Bob can go build something that starts generating revenue or saving money in an afternoon. The ROI isn't, there's not even a question anymore about, a half a day of Bob's time to go and, streamline this process and save us, 5 hours a day with his 4-hour effort. And that didn't exist before. That just did not exist within the Dynamics application before platform, before Power Apps, before Canvas apps. It's completely changed the entire game. Before I let you go, what of the things as you look across the landscape right now and maybe the things that are coming up that have been discussed, that people are aware of. What excites you the most? What do you think is two things? What are you the most excited about? And the other one is, what do you think more customers would be excited about if they understood it better or realized it? That's the kind of like the most underutilized high value thing that people are just missing.
Sure. Those are big questions. I think there's a lot that I get excited about. For people that know me, it's not hard to get me excited.
Yeah, you get excited about that lamp in the background. I know. But.
Exactly. It's a great lamp, Steve. It's not. It's a crappy lamp from IKEA. But look, I think for me, certainly there's a ton of work in our feature backlog that's really cool and really exciting. And there's a lot of work around, particularly around bringing intelligence to the authoring experience that I'm pretty excited about. To the earlier conversation we were having about make it easier for people to be successful and maybe not have to deal with that formula bar. There's a lot of cool stuff that we're starting to apply. We've brought AI Builder to end user apps, but actually bringing that to the maker experience of being and not in magical unicorn pixie dust ways, but just in really practical ways, suggesting ways for people to do things, suggesting things to do next, making it possible to write logic in natural language as opposed to having to know all the ins and outs of a formula, for example. Like, there's some really cool stuff cooking there that I think will start to continue to open up orders of magnitude of humans who can be successful.
Move that bar farther down the path.
Absolutely, right. And those are not, classically sometimes we think about those as tools just for true amateurs, but if you go look at even all the productivity that a product like Visual Studio has brought to professional developers, it's in stuff like type ahead and linting and all that. It's really about bringing micro intelligence to those micro interactions that a person who's living in this tool for 8 hours a day all day long is going to need to be really productive. And so we're really thinking about that both ways. So those things are exciting. I think if you zoom out a little bit, though, beyond the individual level of feature work, I would say what's most exciting to me, and what I hope is getting more exciting to more customers, is less about any one individual feature or product and more about what's possible when you start to combine them at scale. And I think that's where, if you look at organizations that have really gone all in on citizen development and low code for professionals as well, and start to work together. You see this new way of working where you have professionals and amateurs and IT people and business people, knowing each other and working side by side in a place where they traditionally were opposed to each other and or at least just not aware of each other. And that's where you get not just one cool app with one cool feature, but literally thousands of applications inside of organizations that are just creating a crazy amount of value. And you start to change the lives of people in those organizations, both the people that are be able to implement that stuff, but also you just make the jobs better for the people who get to use stuff that was built by their company and was built much faster. That's ultimately super exciting to me, is to start to see this making a real change in the way that humans are working, and doing it through a mix of apps and bots and automations and teams experiences and it's when those things sort of work together in concert that I think they get most exciting. So I'm thrilled to see that happening. I'm really excited about this end-to-end stack of what customers have done with Azure resources through Power Platform in Teams, and how that has created a meaningful dent in how a company works. And I'm super excited about all the work we're doing to make that smoother to actually implement and manage and deploy. But I really hope customers see beyond the one use case, see beyond the one app, or see beyond the one product, and see what's possible when I start to change the economics of how software is rolled out in my company. And by economics, I mean not just price, process. Who participates, right? Yeah.
It is a discovery process. They stumble upon something, they start using something, and if they're successful with it, then they start discovering these other pieces around it that are available around it to extend on it. I don't think the technology itself right now that we have is a blocker to growth. I think the biggest challenge with growth right now probably lies more on the complexity of the licensing side. I mean, there's a lot of customers that can't even get started because they don't understand what they even need or how to buy, especially in the Power Apps store, where they've got some seeded Power Apps capabilities. They don't know what the word seeded even means or that they have it. and then they're seeing all these cool Power Apps things, and they can't figure out,
Yeah.
how do I get from here to there? Why can't I do this and that? And it's I think that probably is a bigger blocker to potential growth than the technology itself.
Maybe, I would say certainly.
Have you read The Licensing Guide?
It's my favorite James Joyce novel.
I'll bet. Well, most customers haven't and wouldn't.
Well, I guess what I would maybe zoom out from that on is I would say, you're right. The technology itself can solve a lot of problems for a lot of different people, and we have existence proof of that. Getting an organization at scale to discover it, to see it in that light, and then to have an organizational culture embrace it. Certainly licensing is a part of that, but it's also about who in IT is responsible for it, and how do we govern it, and where do we roll it out, and who is footing the bill when I do understand how to pay for it. Yes, I mean, at the end of the day, the licensing is actually very simple, which I know is a controversial opinion. It's, you get a measure of it in Office for extending Office. You pay for enterprise data sources. There's two ways to pay. You pay per app or you pay unlimited. Full stop. That's the license. Now, we do not do ourselves many favors when we have classically rolled that out. And I absolutely take your point that we have made the communication of that complex. And for a lot of customers, this is not a commodity expectation. We're at a point right now where everybody needs an email account and a productivity suite and word processing, and every seller needs a CRM license. And those things are not necessarily controversial. It just becomes about what's the best price from the best vendor, because they're mature products in mature markets. Low code is at a very different state of market maturity. And so for a lot of people, it's about not just understanding how our pricing is structured, but understanding organizationally for them, how do they conceptualize ROI? How does the market offer these products? And how do I evaluate that potential expense against the value I'm going to get out of it? And I think, in addition to making things like the licensing guide easier to read for people who do not have PhDs, I think it's also really about helping the market get more mature and seeing, we really genuinely believe this will become an expectation of organizations. That if you go fast forward another couple years, if I can't rapidly innovate internally, and I am dependent on a team of professionals to start from scratch every single time that I need a problem solved, that's going to be a major competitive disadvantage for organizations. And on the flip side, being able to have every information worker be able to do at least basic tasks, extending their software and solving their own problems, is increasingly going to be an expectation. We're not there yet from a market maturity standpoint. Not everybody sees it that way, but we've certainly seen enough proof of organizations already evolving to that point that we know that that's coming. So I think being able to get to that place is a journey for a lot of companies, and it's then really the next phase for us of bringing the world to where we know it can be.
I mean, you just look at some of the things in the past, like the first Obamacare website debacle with all the millions of dollars they spent to basically build a website, and then look at what it would have taken for somebody to pop that up on portals today. I mean, there's no compare. I mean, we've actually lost projects in the past because the people thought we didn't understand the scope. Because we were like 10% of what the other company. So we clearly misunderstood the scope when they just misunderstood the value of a platform and what that does to a development cost and time cycle and everything.
There are government entities that rolled out COVID testing solutions on Power Platform in literally weeks to tens of millions of citizens, and had that go off without any major hiccup. And you're right. But that we get back to that pressure test. It's like getting that to go to scale and to help more people see it that way and be able to expect that from their software. That's really the next mountain to climb.
I think the two challenges that we've had around licensing are that Power Apps versus Power Apps. We got these two products that really are different products that share the same name, and that puts some confusion in customers where they think they already have Power Apps.
They already have it, right?
And don't understand why they have to go buy Power Apps when they have Power Apps. And the other one is the the passes, the per user or the per app passes. Those are assigned in a different way than all the other licenses they have been using internally for years.
Yeah.
Where it's a whole different, and it's like the only thing that's assigned that way.
Yep.
So it's a different process, and they're looking at, how do I do this? I've assigned licenses all the time. I don't understand how to do this. So those are two spots, if you could personally take as a favor to me, and go clean up the pathway on those to make that as smooth as possible for people to understand. That would be awesome.
Yeah, no, and that feedback is well heard across the market. I mean, we are at the pace that we work trying to do some work on the first problem to clarify really Power Apps for Office from Power Apps for standalone. And then separately, the per app concept is a really powerful concept, and actually a lot of organizations have embraced it. There's more, I don't know if I'm allowed to show this, there's more monthly active usage of apps on a per app license today, and this has been true for many months, than there were on either the older two license models, right? I mean, it hunts for a lot of people when they can realize, oh, hey, this is this is a way for me to apply the value of the platform to a use case without having to go have this broader discussion about committing the entire organization to an unlimited number of apps. But you're right, it's a different concept for people, right?
Yeah. And it's just a difference of cost. At $40, I can afford to have 10 people use this. Right. At $10, I can afford to have 40 people use this. Sure. So suddenly, strictly related to cost, you're going to see that usage explode on those lower cost licenses, because those are people now using an app that weren't going to be able to use it before. They weren't going to justify the expense for that level, that tier, if you will. Right. You start getting into $10. I mean, that's pretty much anybody in your organization you could justify $10 for.
Right.
So yeah, now suddenly everybody has an app.
Yep. Yep. Well, and I would say we've seen a number of customers already, even though this has been in market only about a year, start there and then very quickly realize, actually, no, we want unlimited. So like getting people through the transition is a phase as well. But
and it's something that you take into account as a builder of apps also. If you're wanting to try and build for that, you build your apps, understanding the licensing structure, and you design for it.
Yeah.
So listen, Ryan, I appreciate you taking this time out of your obviously not busy afternoon. a rare not busy afternoon for you, I'm sure. I'm feeling very lucky to have caught you when I did.
Sure.
And any closing thoughts?
Hey, keep doing what you're doing, Steve. Both being a rock in the community and also pushing us on the platform to make it better. I think ultimately, we see this as a thing we're doing together, and I mean that really genuinely. We don't sit in an ivory tower. As you know, when we do, we make plenty of blunders. But I think this thing we are building is bigger than lines of code. It's a mindset, and I think the more that the community embraces it, the faster we go. So I really appreciate you and everybody that is hopefully going to listen to this someday and participate.
Well, there'll be thousands listening. There usually are, so don't worry.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for the call, Steve.
All right, cool, man. Talk to you later.
Be well. Peace.